Have you ever maybe just paused for a second, watching a movie or seeing a news headline and just wondered how? How did one single nation get to have such massive influence all over the world?
It's a really fundamental question, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, how does a country that's, pretty young, historically speaking, maybe 250 years old, get to a point where its decisions, its economy, its culture, even its military, just echoes everywhere?
It's definitely more than just a passing curiosity. It really shakes how we understand, well, everything. Geopolitics, economics, honestly, even our day-to-day lives, no matter where we are.
Right.
And that big question, that's exactly what we're going to tackle today. We're doing a deep dive.
Exactly. Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Our mission today, and this is specifically for you, is to unpack all those different reasons behind the United States being this global superpower. We're going to look at how a nation that basically started from scratch, relatively speaking, managed to gain such huge, far-reaching influence.
Think of this as your shortcut. We want to give you a faster way to get really well informed on the key things that built up American power. We'll be boiling down some complex stuff into, hopefully, digestible insights. We'll highlight some surprising facts, give you the context you need.
Yeah, connect the dots for you. We've got this great collection of source material, historical accounts, economic numbers, cultural bits. It really details all these different aspects of U.S. power from the very beginning right up to today.
It's like an unfolding tapestry, really.
Good way to put it. So let's start pulling out the important threads for you. Okay, so let's really get into this. Where do we start? The beginning, right? The genesis of a giant.
Makes sense.
The story really kicks off in 1776, that Declaration of Independence from Britain. But it wasn't just political, was it? It was bigger than that.
Oh, much bigger. It's a huge ideological statement, almost like a conceptual earthquake, as you said. It wasn't just saying we're independent. It was declaring a whole set of beliefs that were, frankly, revolutionary for that time.
Beliefs like what, specifically?
Well, from the get-go, this new American nation talked about individual freedom, about democracy, self-governance, and this really radical idea that power comes from the people. Not from a king, not from inherited status, definitely not from some far-off empire.
And that was so different from how things were done elsewhere, especially in Europe.
Exactly. Think about the 18th century. Most places, monarchies, inherited power, established social structures, the old kingdoms.
Yeah.
So for a nation to say, nope, we're founded on the idea that the citizens hold the power, it wasn't just challenging the status quo, it was turning it completely upside down. Groundbreaking stuff.
Absolutely. Those European kingdoms were built on, centuries of tradition, royal bloodlines, strict social classes that pretty much decided your life for you. Then here comes this upstart nation saying individual liberty and self-rule are the foundation. It wasn't just politics, it was like an ideological tremor.
Yeah, and it echoed, didn't it? It inspired other movements later on for independence, for self-determination, for decades, centuries even. Just the idea that you could maybe break free from inherited power and build something based on rights. That was almost alien to the big powers back then.
Yeah.
A different way to organize society.
So how did these big ideas, these founding ideals, actually translate into growth? How did they set the stage in a practical sense?
That's the key question. By focusing on things like individual liberty, popular sovereignty, the U.S. basically created a framework that, at least in theory, allowed for a kind of dynamism, a social mobility that was pretty unusual. Think about it. In Europe, you often had these old structures, aristocratic barriers, that could really stifle ambition. America, comparatively, was more of a blank slate,
Right.
which meant that talent, ambition, new ideas, they could potentially find room to grow, regardless of who your parents were. This unique sort of ideological DNA, it fostered innovation, individual drive, in a way that those more rigid societies just couldn't easily match.
It was the promise of moving up, not based on your family, but on what you could do.
Exactly. Merit, hard work. Or at least that was the promise.
And this wasn't just talk. This unique start quickly turned into a real magnet for growth. The sources talk about the Constitution being established, and crucially, it wasn't just setting up a government, it explicitly gave rights to the people. That's a big difference, right? Not a king granting favors you might lose later.
Precisely. It was a foundational document saying these rights are inherent. They exist before the government. And this unique blueprint, especially protecting individual liberties, property rights, it acted like this incredible magnet.
How so?
Well, imagine you're, say, a farmer in Europe or a craftsman somewhere. Your rights might be shaky, opportunities limited by your birth, maybe some distant king rules things arbitrarily.
Okay.
Then you hear about this new place, a republic, with a written constitution that guarantees freedoms, protects what you own, outlines a path for getting ahead.
You'd be interested.
Absolutely. It's no wonder the sources say this framework attracted immigrants, dreamers, and entrepreneurs from all over the world. This constant flow of different people wasn't just about numbers. It was about skills, different viewpoints, ambition, basically human capital pouring in.
And that feeds right into that powerful idea of the American dream, doesn't it?
It really does.
The belief that anyone, no matter where they started, could make it through hard work. It wasn't just a slogan. It became this national ethos, right? It fueled ambition, created this environment where growth and new ideas could really take root.
Yeah, and this promise of upward mobility kind of baked into the system, protected by law. It created this powerful cycle. Opportunity pulls in talent.
And that talent creates more opportunity.
Exactly, a kind of self-reinforcing loop. It drove economic growth, social change. It was a virtuous cycle, really, that was hard to find elsewhere back then.
And the diversity aspect you mentioned, that continuous influx of people from everywhere, that must have been a huge factor, too.
Oh, critical, both for the early energy and for growth over the long haul. The immigrant population didn't just bring labor. They brought different cultural views, entrepreneurial energy, new ideas, different ways of doing things.
You mean like specific skills, or?
Yeah, think about, say, agricultural techniques from German immigrants or industrial skills from Irish and Italian newcomers, or the business drive in Jewish communities. This whole melting pot idea, driven by that American dream promise, arguably made the U.S. way more adaptable, more resilient, more innovative than maybe more uniform societies.
Like a societal engine constantly getting fresh fuel.
A good way to put it. Fresh ambition, belief in starting over.
Okay, so we have these strong founding ideas, this constant flow of diverse talent, and then America starts to build, really build. And this is where it gets, well, fascinating. We move into the 1800s, early 1900s, this incredible period of industrial transformation. This really laid the foundation for its global role later on.
Yeah, the sources describe the U.S. becoming this industrial powerhouse, building railways, factories, and cities at lightning speed.
Lightning speed. That phrase really jumps out.
It does. And it's not really an exaggeration. It captures the sheer scale and pace of it all. It wasn't slow, steady growth. It felt like an acceleration.
What drove it?
A mix of things.
Yeah.
Huge natural resources, coal, iron, timber, you name it. A rapidly growing workforce thanks to immigration. And this spirit of innovation embracing new tech.
And what did all this building mean for the country's potential?
It meant they were putting in place the actual physical and economic skeleton needed to support not just more people, but eventually a global presence. Think about laying down thousands and thousands of miles of railroad tracks connecting the country, creating a national market, or building huge factory centers, entire cities popping up, sometimes in places that were wilderness just decades earlier. The scale of effort and invention was just immense.
And out of all this energy came these massive companies, right? The ones that became household names. The sources mentioned Ford, General Electric, Standard Oil.
Titans, really. They weren't just businesses. They were like economic engines. They gathered enormous wealth. But more importantly, they built up industrial capacity that was pretty much unmatched anywhere else at that point.
Can you give an example?
Well, Ford, obviously, with the assembly line,
Yeah.
revolutionized manufacturing, made cars affordable. GE, General Electric, they were pioneers in electricity, appliances, changing daily life. Standard Oil basically fueled the whole thing, a nation on the move.
Their size, their methods, they dominated these new industries.
Absolutely. And that created this incredibly strong domestic economic base, which was crucial, absolutely crucial, for projecting power outside its borders later on.
So this industrial strength that connects directly to the U.S. starting to have influence internationally.
Directly. By the time World War I breaks out, the sources note the U.S. was already a strong player globally. And it wasn't just military muscle, though that was growing too. It was economic power.
How so?
Its factories could churn out goods, war supplies for the Allies. Its farms could feed nations caught up in the conflict. Its banks were getting tangled up in the global economy.
So its sheer ability to produce things gave it clout.
Exactly. It could make a big difference in global conflicts, in global trade. It signaled, hey, we're a major player now, even before the huge upheavals of the 20th century really hit.
Plus, being neutral at the start of WWI helped financially, didn't it?
Massively. It became the world's main lender. The financial center basically shifted from London to New York. That's a huge shift in power right there.
And those upheavals you mentioned, especially World War II. That seems to be the real, undeniable moment America steps up as the global leader.
It's the pivotal turning point. The sources make this crystal clear. After World War II, think about the state of the world. Much of Europe, devastated. Japan, the same. Cities in ruins, industries destroyed, economies shattered.
But the U.S. itself.
The U.S. mainland was safe and strong. It hadn't been bombed, its factories weren't rubble. In fact, its industrial capacity was actually supercharged from wartime production. The contrast was just immense.
It's a massive strategic advantage.
Monumental. While everyone else was basically picking up the pieces, the U.S. was the only major industrial power left standing that could actually lead a global recovery.
And they took that role on actively.
They did. They didn't just sit back, look at the Marshall Plan. Okay, yes, partly altruistic maybe, but also a really smart strategic move.
How so?
Rebuild economies in Europe, create stability, sure, but also create future trading partners for American goods. And, importantly, demonstrate American leadership, contain communism.
And it wasn't just the Marshall Plan, right? They were central in setting up new global organizations.
Absolutely central. Establishing things like the United Nations, NATO for security, the World Bank for finance. This gave the U.S. enormous political and economic influence. They weren't just in the world system, they were actively designing it, setting the rules, the financial systems, the security structures that basically define the next several decades.
So that's why this period really seals the deal. The U.S. becomes the clear global leader, not just strong economically or militarily, but actually building the whole post-war world order.
Pretty much. They wrote the rules for the new game, called the important meetings, provided most of the money and resources for rebuilding. That kind of leadership builds deep ties, dependencies, alliances.
Alliances that often last generations.
Exactly. It was a conscious decision to lead, and frankly, much of the world accepted it, partly out of need, partly maybe out of admiration, too.
And what's really interesting is that while all this political and economic stuff is happening, something else is rising, too. American culture.
Yes. At the exact same time, the sources say the U.S. became a cultural superstar. Think Hollywood, Coca-Cola, and American pop music spreading globally.
This is that soft power idea, right? Before it even had a formal name.
Precisely. Influence through attraction, not force.
Right.
Hollywood movies, Coke, pop music. They started shaping what people around the world wanted, what they aspired to.
It's amazing how that works almost separately from government policy. A kid somewhere might never see a U.S. diplomat, but they're drinking the Coke, hearing the music, maybe seeing the movies.
And that cultural reach, it subtly reinforces the overall standing. It creates this feeling of familiarity, maybe even aspiration. It makes people more receptive, potentially, to American ideas, products, even political values. It built this global audience.
It creates a narrative, maybe, a vision of the good life.
Exactly. A compelling narrative spread through popular culture. And it laid the groundwork for even more cultural influence later on. It built this reservoir of recognition, maybe even goodwill, that's hard for other countries to replicate just through politics or economics.
Okay, so that brings us closer to the present day. We've got the foundations, the post-war rise. What about the pillars of American dominance now? Let's start with the economy.
Right. The numbers are just huge. The sources state clearly the U.S. has the world's largest economy. We're talking over $25 trillion GDP every year. It's hard to even wrap your head around that figure.
And it's not just the size, is it? It's how it's connected globally.
Absolutely. The scale itself allows for massive investment, R&D, infrastructure, innovation. But maybe even more important globally is the U.S. dollar.
Ah, the dollar being the world's main currency.
Yes, used for trade, oil, and banking, pretty much everywhere. Most international deals, commodities, debts, they're priced in dollars.
What does that actually do for the U.S.?
It gives it incredible leverage. Financial flexibility, sometimes called exorbitant privilege. It can borrow more cheaply. It's somewhat insulated from certain global financial shocks. It can influence global money flows in a way no other country really can.
And this economic power isn't just sitting still. It's constantly being renewed by, well, by tech, right? The sources highlight companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Tesla.
Key drivers, for sure. These aren't just huge companies, they're global trendsetters. They dominate their markets, they drive innovation, they basically shape global tech and consumer behavior.
And they pull in talent and money from everywhere.
Which creates this powerful feedback loop you mentioned earlier. The size of the economy, the innovative companies, the stable dollar. It all attracts more investment, more top talent.
Like an ecosystem.
Exactly. Companies want to be where the action is, where the talent is, where the biggest markets are. So it concentrates activity and innovation, which just reinforces the leading position. It keeps regenerating itself.
Okay, so massive economy. Pillar number one. What about pillar number two? Military power.
Undeniable. The analysis calls the U.S. military the largest and most advanced in the world. And the spending that really tells the story.
The figure is.
It spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. That's not just a budget number. It's a statement of capability, of reach, of strategic priority.
And what does that money buy? What kind of advantages?
Well, the sources list things like aircraft carriers, nuclear weapons, sky satellites, and military bases around the globe. These aren't just symbolic. They're tools for projecting power, for deterrence.
Like the aircraft carriers.
10 active carrier strike groups. That means they can send significant air power almost anywhere on Earth, relatively quickly. Then you have the nuclear triad: land, sea, air, the ultimate deterrent. Spy satellites give unmatched intelligence. And bases all over the world mean forward presence, rapid response capability.
So this military strength allows the U.S. to, what, protect allies, secure trade?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Protect allies, deter potential rivals, keep vital shipping lanes open, respond to global crises, lead coalitions. It essentially lets the U.S. act as a kind of global security backstop or enforcer.
It must shape how every other country thinks about its own security and foreign policy.
Absolutely. They either look to the U.S. for security guarantees,
Right.
or they have to constantly calculate based on U.S. capabilities. It's a fundamental piece of its global leadership role. Creates alliances, but also friction sometimes, naturally.
And this leadership isn't just on land or sea. Space comes into it, too.
Right. The U.S. is described as a major space power. Historically, NASA sending the first humans to the moon back in '69. That was huge, technologically and symbolically.
A massive statement of capability.
And today, that leadership continues, but it looks a bit different now. There's collaboration with private companies like SpaceX.
What's the significance of leading in space?
Symbolically, it shows advanced tech, long-term vision, willingness to tackle big, risky projects. Practically, huge advantages. Military advantages from spy and communication satellites, economic ones from GPS, global internet, weather forecasting, scientific leadership too.
And this shift towards working with private companies like SpaceX.
That's really interesting. It shows adaptability, leveraging private sector drive and money for national goals. It often means faster innovation, maybe lower costs. It points to a future where space is even more integrated into the economy and strategy. It's another key area for maintaining an edge.
So we've got economy, military, space. But where does all the innovation that drives this actually come from? It seems linked to education.
Deeply linked. The U.S. is called a hub of innovation, and Silicon Valley is named specifically as the center of the tech world. That didn't happen by accident.
It's an ecosystem again.
Exactly. Innovation needs a constant supply of talent and new ideas. That's where the education system is critical. The sources point to top universities like Harvard, MIT, and Stanford.
These aren't just colleges.
No, they're incubators. For cutting-edge research, scientific breakthroughs, entrepreneurial thinking, they produce a huge share of the world's top scientists, CEOs, and Nobel Prize winners.
And these people fuel the industries that drive the economy and tech leadership.
It's a symbiotic relationship. Great universities attract the best minds from all over the world.
The brain drain effect.
Right. Those minds drive innovation, which strengthens the economy, which allows more investment back into education and research. It's a powerful cycle that keeps the U.S. at the forefront.
So this constant flow of talent and new ideas ensures the U.S. stays ahead in key areas, like AI, biotech.
Pretty much. Advances in those cutting-edge fields, often coming out of these innovation hubs, give the U.S. a critical edge. Not just economically, but strategically too. Defense, healthcare, global competitiveness. It's a fundamental driver of future power.
Okay, but power isn't just about dollars and weapons and labs, is it? We touched on it earlier, this idea of soft power.
Yes, influence through culture, not force. It's about attraction, making others want what you have or admire your way of life.
And the sources give examples.
Plenty. Everything from Marvel movies and McDonald's to music like hip-hop and pop. These things cross borders effortlessly. They appeal to universal desires, entertainment, convenience, connection.
Marvel movies promoting certain values, maybe? McDonald's symbolizing a lifestyle?
You could argue that. Marvel often has themes of individualism, heroism. McDonald's became a global symbol of American-style fast food culture. And music like hip-hop or pop born in the U.S. are now global languages, especially for young people. They shape tastes, influence lifestyles, create this shared global culture, often with American roots.
And it goes deeper than just products, right? The fact that people wear American clothes, that so many learn to speak English, that people dream of visiting New York or Los Angeles.
That reflects a really deep cultural pull. It operates below the surface of politics. It's not about policy. It's about aspiration. A lifestyle, values, a vision of opportunity that resonates with people everywhere, sometimes without them even realizing it.
Which makes it really resilient, hard to counteract with just propaganda or something.
Very hard. It taps into personal dreams and desires. And this soft power, it subtly helps the other kinds of power. If people generally admire your culture, maybe they view your government's actions more favorably.
Or if everyone uses your language for business and science.
Communication is easier, collaboration flows better. This cultural connection creates familiarity, maybe even affection sometimes. That can smooth the way for diplomacy, trade, even security partnerships. It's like a force multiplier, a silent ambassador.
Okay, so let's try to pull all these threads together as we wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
The U.S. superpower status. It's clearly not down to just one thing. It's this complex mix. The sources reiterate the key elements: strong economy, world-class military, freedom of speech, high-quality education, and global culture.
And the crucial thing, I think, is how they connect. They aren't separate silos. They feed each other. The strong economy funds the military and the research. Freedom of speech helps drive innovation. The attractive culture pulls in global talent, which boosts the economy and innovation.
It's a synergy.
Exactly. A powerful synergy. The combination, the interplay between all these factors, that's what really defines its superpower status. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Now, for a balanced view, the analysis does point out that it's not a perfect picture. It explicitly mentions it's not perfect. The U.S. has issues like racism, gun violence, and inequality.
And it's important to include that for a complete understanding. Acknowledging these internal challenges gives a more nuanced view. Global leadership doesn't mean domestic perfection. These are tough, ongoing problems many nations face in different ways,
Presenting the full scope of what the sources say.
which naturally leads to thinking about how these internal issues might affect things externally. How do they impact perceptions of U.S. power or its soft power appeal?
Does the research get into that?
Not in detail, but you can connect the dots. Persistent problems, especially ones that seem to clash with those founding ideals of freedom and equality, well, they can complicate diplomacy sometimes. Maybe tarnish the cultural image a bit on the world stage.
It makes the picture more complex, more human.
Right. It shows that even a superpower grapples with significant internal struggles, and those struggles can influence its external image and how effective it is. Not a monolith.
But despite all that complexity, those internal challenges, the consistent message from the research is that the U.S. still leads in many ways. It's still the global superpower.
Which speaks to the sheer strength and resilience of those systems and foundations we've been talking about. The economy, the military, the innovation engine, the cultural reach. They're incredibly deep-rooted.
Yet nothing stays the same forever in global politics.
Definitely not. Global power shifts. It's dynamic. And that's why the sources end on that note of uncertainty. The future, we don't know.
Which isn't giving up, it's just being realistic.
Exactly. It's an invitation to keep watching, keep thinking critically. New powers rise, technology changes everything, global dynamics evolve. The U.S. has been dominant for a long time, but the forces that shape power are always at work, inside and outside, always shaping what's next.
Okay, so we've taken this really deep look today. We went from the founding ideas through the industrial buildup, the post-WWII moment, right up to today's economic, military, and innovation strengths, plus that pervasive soft power.
It's a really complex picture we've unpacked from the material. Hopefully, it gives you, our listener, that shortcut to understanding this global giant.
It's quite a tapestry, as you said.
It is. And that leads us to maybe one final thought for you to chew on after we finish.
Okay.
Given everything we've explored today, those deep historical roots, the founding ideals, the Constitution, the economic engine, the culture, all of it, what do you think? Based on these foundations we've just unpacked, what would be the single most important factor that could either really strengthen America's global standing in the years ahead or potentially challenge it the most?
Wow, that is a big question. Forces you to connect the history to the future.
It does. Think about those core elements.
We really hope you'll mull that over, maybe continue your own exploration, understanding these complex layers of power. It's just so crucial today for being well informed about the world we live in.